Most serial killers don't look like monsters. They don't walk through life wearing some obvious sign that something is wrong. They don't usually appear violent, unstable, or even particularly unusual. In fact, many of them look completely ordinary. They have jobs, they have neighbors, some even have families. Which raises a disturbing question. If serial killers can look so normal, what actually makes someone become one? Welcome to my channel. In this series, we're going to explore true crime through the lens of psychology, investigation, and patterns that investigators have seen repeated across decades of cases. The goal here isn't to glorify criminals or sensationalize violence. Instead, we're going to focus on understanding behavior, learning how investigators solve these crimes, and remembering the victims whose lives were taken. In today's first episode, we're starting with a foundational question. What makes a serial killer? Before we look at the psychology, we need to define what a serial killer actually is. A serial killer is generally defined as someone who commits 2 or more murders in separate events with a period of time in between those crimes. That break between murders is called the cooling off period. This cooling off period is what separates serial killers from mass killers or spree killers. Mass killers typically commit multiple murders in a single event. Spree killers commit several murders in a short burst of time without stopping. Serial killers, on the other hand, return to everyday life between crimes. They may go back to work, interact with family and friends, and appear completely normal. But behind the scenes, something very different is happening. One of the most common misconceptions about serial killers is that they are all completely insane. In reality, most serial killers are legally sane. They understand right from wrong. They understand the consequences of their actions. And perhaps most importantly, they often plan their crimes very carefully. They may stalk victims, choose locations ahead of time, and take steps to avoid detection. This planning shows that their behavior is not random chaos. Instead, it is often part of a deeply rooted psychological pattern. Many criminal psychologists believe that serial murder often begins with violent fantasy. These fantasies can begin years before the first crime ever takes place. They may start during adolescent or early adulthood and slowly become more intense over time. In the beginning, the fantasies exist only in the mind. But for some individuals, fantasy alone eventually stops being enough. They begin to imagine acting out those scenarios in real life. And when that mental line is crossed, the risk of violence increases dramatically. For many serial killers, the first murder isn't the start of the fantasy. It's the moment when fantasy becomes reality. Another common theme in serial killer psychology is power and control. Many killers report feeling powerless in their personal lives. They may struggle socially, they may feel rejected or humiliated, they may experience deep resentment towards others. Violence becomes a way to reverse that feeling. For a brief moment, the killer feels completely in control of another human being. That sense of dominance can become psychologically reinforcing, which means the behavior may repeat. When investigators look at the backgrounds of many serial killers, certain patterns sometimes appear. Some experienced unstable childhoods, while others face neglect, abuse, or extreme isolation. But it's important to be very clear about something. Millions of people experience trauma in their lives and never harm anyone. A difficult childhood does not create a serial killer by itself. Instead, these early experiences may combine with personality traits, psychological issues, and environmental factors. Serial crime is almost always the result of multiple influences interacting together. Although every case is different, investigators have noticed several personality traits that appear frequently in serial killer profiles. These may include a lack of empathy for others, manipulative behavior, a strong sense of entitlement or narcissism, and sometimes a surprising level of charm. The last trait is particularly important. Some serial killers are skilled at presenting themselves as trustworthy, friendly, or even likable. This ability to hide their true personality can allow them to move through society without attracting suspicion. In many cases, the first murder is not spontaneous. It may follow years of fantasy, planning, and emotional buildup. After that first crime, something often changes. The individual may begin refining their behavior. They learn what worked, they learn what mistakes they made, and if they are not caught, the crimes may continue. This process is often called escalation. The behavior becomes more frequent, more deliberate, and sometimes more risky. One question investigators often ask is why serial killers keep going. Why not stop after the first crime? The answer may lie in psychological reinforcement. The emotional payoff that the killer experiences doesn't last. Over time, the urge to recreate that feeling returns, which can lead to repeated crimes. Historically, most serial killers are stopped only when they are arrested, die, or become physically unable to continue. Before we close, it's important to remember that true crime stories are not just puzzles or mysteries. They involve real people, real victims, and families who continue to live with the consequences of these crimes. Understanding criminal psychology is not about admiration or fascination with offenders. It's about awareness, education, and justice. In the next episode, we're going to look at something investigators study very closely: how serial killers choose their victims. Patterns in victim selection often reveal important clues about motive, behavior, and how these criminals are eventually caught. If you're interested in thoughtful, psychology-focused true crime content, consider subscribing, and thank you for watching.